Pulisic dentro, Rafa. Gol! Ebram! Gol! È l'azione più bella del mondo! È l'azione più bella!
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the SempreMilan podcast. I'm your host Ollie Fisher, joined once again by Anthony Torgrud.
Hey guys, glad to be back. As you can tell, we have a very special guest today, Adam Summerton from TNT Sports. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It really is a pleasure. I think this is the third time you've been on the podcast, and I always get very excited when we get the green light because many will know you as the voice of Serie A here in the UK. And I'm not just saying this because you're here now, but for my money, the best commentator in the business. Really big fan of what you do. And it's always great to get you on before a season, especially after what was a chaotic one in Serie A, a chaotic one for Milan. It's been a chaotic summer already. And yeah, goodness knows what's going to happen next season. Before we dive into the episode in full, though, I need to say thank you to our founding members over on Substack, which is, of course, our bonus content platform. Des Winter, McGlynn, Tito, Matt, Moritz, Pullman, Joey Gawler, Kemin, MJ, Mats, Luke Villano, Raul Escobar, Jack Calafassi, Nasser, Merlin Finker, Derek Favretto, Hevanly 13, Mike Schulz, JT Physio, Tourette, Marco Villela, Roberto Racinos, Ken Medicaid, and Gianluca. Thank you so much for the support that you show us over on the Substack. I feel like Eminem every time I do that. Just rolling the syllables off. But let's dive into it. We've got quite a lot to cover. And I wanted to take a look backwards before we talk about the present and potentially the future in Italian football. Obviously, from what you do in terms of work, but also as a fan of calcio in general. What was it like covering and experiencing last season, the 2024-25 season, given that basically everything was up for grabs right down to the wire? You know, there was a Scudetto race between Inter and Napoli. The top four battle ended up going to the last game. And even the relegation fight, Bari Monza, ended up being quite an intriguing one. I think it was one of the most interesting seasons in recent Serie A memory, but for Milan being god-awful. What was it like from your point of view?
I'd have to say I've covered the league for 12 years on TV, and I would say that it's probably the season that I've enjoyed the most, partly for the reasons that you've outlined there. But I also do the Sunday night game, and we were just quite fortunate that we had so many ridiculous games. Now, that could have been because, you know, we had both the managers sent off and it was chaos, or it might have been a high-scoring game, or it might have just been because what was riding on it, or it could have been because it's one of the many, many derby matches we tend to get on a Sunday night as well. It just felt every time we rocked up on a Sunday night that there was something to get really excited about. So obviously the title race was fascinating and going right down to the wire as it did. The whole Scott McTominay story, from speaking from a British point of view as well, and working for a British broadcaster, clearly added to the excitement and the intrigue too, and the role that he plays. I mean, it's one of the best individual stories that I've seen and covered during my time covering the league. And as ever with calcio, I mean, I say this every year, it's like a never-ending soap opera, isn't it? There's always a controversy. There's always something going on. And my word, it really held the interest. But I think that the thing that always strikes me is walking away from doing Sunday night games, and whether it be with Tony DeRigo or Don Hutchison, whoever it was I was with, we seem to walk out almost every Sunday night going, wow, where's it going to take us next? So yeah, really, really memorable, as probably the most memorable I've had covering the league. Yeah.
Was there a particular game that stood out as like the most memorable or most exciting one that you did this season?
Well, there was so many. I remember Lazio Fiorentina was one that had one of the most chaotic endings that I can remember. It was just absolute chaos towards the end of that game. I'm pretty certain I've remembered that one. But I suppose the game of the season was probably Inter 4, Juve 4, wasn't it? Which I didn't actually do. I was a bit unlucky with that one. I missed out on that one. But what a game that was. I felt that in terms of showcasing the real technical quality of the league, I felt that probably the Atalanta-Napoli game was probably I think Napoli won 3-2, if memory serves me right. Yeah. I think that was an exceptionally high technical level. I really remember that. But there was I remember it was fairly early on in the season. Was it September, the first Milan derby, where that was won right towards the end with that header, and the fact you had a goal scorer in Gabbia who'd stood on the terraces, who'd supported the team as a boy, gone there with his grandparents. I think once you get a storyline like that, so early on in the season, you do start to think, oh, could this be a really great year? That was probably the high mark of Milan's season, as it turned out, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
But
yeah. Speaking of Milan's season, from the outside looking in, someone who perhaps isn't as emotionally invested as what we are, how did you see the disaster unfold that was our 2024-25 season, and what do you think were the main causes of it?
Well, I always felt, and I think I might have said this to you guys, that I was quite diplomatic how I put it, because I always try to be, because I don't think it's very fair to, go in two-footed on people, particularly when they've not had a chance to prove themselves with the club first. But I was always not sure that Fonseca was the right appointment, and I just felt that they got that wrong, and everything else, then they maybe realised that, perhaps panicked a bit. And we all know it's not easy for a coach to come in mid-season, although it started very well for Conceição. And I say the derby was the high point. I suppose other people would say, well, it was winning a piece of silverware that was the high point with the Super Coppa. But I guess it depends on how seriously you take that competition. But I felt that they got that wrong. And then a lot of it went from there, really. It was very difficult to pull it back once it had gone as bad as it had gone. And that was where it all started, really. I mean, Conceição, to throw such a big personality, a combustible personality, into a situation as fractious as it was at Milan, I guess it was always either going to be one extreme or the other. And you felt the way that it started, that it might be really positive and he might really galvanize everyone and it might be really successful. But it quickly, didn't it, unraveled and falling out with people, and situations with players like Calabria, and very public falling out. And yeah, it was just a great shame the way that it went, because whilst it was not a great Milan squad by any stretch of the imagination, but if you looked at the squad list player for player, you'd have to say they should have finished a lot higher than they did.
Yeah, after that season, and I say winter overhaul, but really it was a January 31st overhaul. It seemed like every deal was on that last day of the winter window. After that overhaul, and then where we finished, and then bringing in Tare and Allegri, do you think this summer overhaul was also necessary?
Well, I think a lot needed to change at Milan, because you looked at it as rotten as it seemed to have got by the end of the season. I think I remember saying that to one of my co-coms who I was working with at the end of last season. I just said it just looks and feels like a group, a collective, a club that just needs just freshening up, just a complete fresh start. And there were certain players you felt, whether it be their fault or not, that maybe it was time that they moved on. And I suppose we've seen that to a degree. I think what you've got with Allegri is a safe pair of hands. Now, the supporters will not need telling that also means that you might not necessarily see the most exciting football or the type of exciting football that you would perhaps like to see. But what he will probably do, Allegri, and we've seen signs of this already, is he'll look to shore them up and make them strong from the back, and to use a cliche, build from the back. But I actually think that might just be what they need at the moment. So it's a bit of a trade-off, isn't it? You're not necessarily going to get really exciting front foot football, but you will start to maybe build from the back and become more solid and build a base then to which you can go forward. So, the name that has excited me the most in terms of the players coming in is Yashari, because I watched Club Brugge a few times in the Champions League last season, most notably when they took apart Atalanta in Bergamo, and he was a key part of that. A really good player. I really like that team as a whole, and as I say, he helped make them function in the centre of the pitch. So I'm quite excited by him, but not just because of him, but what I think he'll help facilitate, which is for Fana to really do what I think he's best at, which is getting forward and looking to affect things towards the final third. I mean, people have talked about him as a defensive midfielder. I don't see him like that at all. I see him as somebody who can be box to box, somebody who can have an influence in the final third, who can look to drive Milan forward. So I think he will perhaps help facilitate that. So it's really interesting with the centre forward issue ongoing as well. Who will they bring somebody in? They're clearly keen on Højlund. Vlahovic has been mentioned as well. This experiment with Rafael Leao through the centre, I can't see there being a longevity in that, but some people seem to think there could be. So there's a lot still kind of up in the air, isn't there, with Milan? You're thinking, where will these pieces all fall? But I would have to say that a key thing for me for assessing how things will go for them this season is to note and remember and underline and underscore that there's no European football. And I think that is a blessing in disguise for where Milan find themselves right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. Just recalling the comment there that you said about Fonseca and how you thought at that time that it wasn't the right appointment. It was perhaps a bit of a risk that we couldn't afford to take after what was, in relative terms, a successful recent era under Stefano Pioli. They chose to kind of go with the gamble on a foreign coach, albeit someone who had experience with Roma, when really in that situation, the safe pair of hands might have been to go with Antonio Conte, who by all accounts wanted to join us. In the end, he goes to Napoli, who managed to convince him. They spend a fair bit of money, and what do you get? They win the league. And people didn't want Conte because of, the fact that he's a bit of a volatile character. Sometimes, level accusations that his football isn't the best either. But ultimately, they're the ones celebrating a league title. And we are left picking up the pieces after finishing 8th and being dumped out of Europe by Feyenoord and losing a cup final, things like that. Do you think that maybe it was a bit of a lesson for the management? Okay, we can't outsmart Italian football by doing it our way with algorithms and things like that. You just need a bit of league experience sometimes. And having turned to that, do you think that we will do a bit better this season because we've got known customers in that sense?
Yeah, I mean, I've always liked Allegri as a coach, and I always tried to defend him when he was getting absolutely hammered at times at Juve. I could see the point that fans who weren't happy with him were making, that it was hard to watch at times, but particularly in his second spell at Juventus, I felt that in some ways he didn't necessarily have the tools to do the job that the fans seemed to want him to do. It wasn't a great squad. They hadn't recruited well. It was a difficult situation, and you could argue that he still did pretty well with what he had available to them. This wasn't the Juventus of his first spell. I mean, it was miles off it. You consider some of the talent that he had at his disposal then. So he's somebody with a proven track record. And as I said to you earlier, I just feel that is, it might not be, the sexy football. It might not be something that is really eye-catching. I suspect it almost certainly won't be. But it seems to fit for me for where they are right now in their development. And, they've had two coaches in very quick succession that maybe might have looked to have done things differently, and it hasn't worked. And there's only so far they could have let it go, because it was clear at the end of last season that change had to happen again. It just felt, I don't know if toxic is maybe taking it too far, but it was certainly on that path.
I think it was.
It just felt a mess. It felt that nobody was pulling in the same direction. And this is I think sometimes maybe people, not necessarily in Italy, but I think we lose track of just how big this football club is. This is a gigantic institution with an incredible history. And it, certainly the fans deserve better than what they were served up, certainly, last season. So I think he'll bring an element of calm, you would hope. However, I'll go back to what I said on another podcast at the start of the summer. I think he's got one of the most difficult jobs in Italy, because there will still be, and that's partly because of what I've just said about the history and traditions of the club, there will still be a level of expectation that maybe doesn't quite marry up with the squad as we see it right now. And I know people will perhaps debate and disagree about the strength of the current squad right now, but I think there's still a lot of work to do there in the market, personally. I know that they've made some incomings and the squad's starting to take shape a little bit, but there's still work to do there. But particularly without the European football, and people seeing what Napoli did last season without European football, I still think expectations could be relatively high, and there's a balance to be struck there, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of touched on what I wanted to ask you next about the market, but with 150 million euros in sales, Teo leaving, Reiner's leaving, etc., and then all the new names brought in, how do you feel about the business done so far, and what are those missing pieces that you think they still need?
Well, I'd like to see them go for a centre forward. I see today that is it Saki who's gone in on a bit on Højlund, saying that he can't understand why, he basically said,
he's not Van Basten.
Yeah, he's no Van Basten, which to be fair is true. I think, with Højlund, and look, someone might play a recording this to me in a year's time and I might look silly, but I think that if Højlund leaves Manchester United, which by all accounts he seems reluctant to do, but if he does leave Manchester United, I think he'll score a lot of goals somewhere else.
Yeah,
I really do. I've got that feeling that I saw enough at Atalanta. Now, the people who didn't see him at Atalanta, who've only watched him at United, and I know them because I get them all the time on social media, but they would call me a lunatic for saying this. But I saw enough at Atalanta to tell me that there is a real player there. And I do think that his confidence has been absolutely shot by being in a terrible environment that it's been during his time at Manchester United. And if you look at his first season, it wasn't exactly a disaster either. He did okay. No. Particularly in Europe, his strike rate was pretty good, particularly in a team that didn't really look to service him very much at all, because you had two wide players who were more interested in scoring themselves than they were in setting a centre forward up. So I've still got this feeling, and I'm still loyal to the Højlund cause, that I think he could still really do well if he gets out of Manchester United. That aside, I believe we hear that they're interested in Vlahovic as well. So that's something that needs sorting, because for me, I just don't see Rafael Leao as a realistic long-term or even medium-term option at centre forward. I mean, I just don't see that. I understand why they may be experimenting with it, because if they're left short, then it's another option. But I don't see any real mileage in that personally.
Way better in the open field.
You're
limiting his strengths by.
It would be great if Allegri could get him back to where he was under Stefano Pioli. I think it was with you two guys actually last summer, where I sort of said, look, if somebody say Saudi offered you 70 million euro for Leao now, would you take it? Because I would have. I would have taken it and put it into, because I just felt like, I don't know, I just felt like we weren't seeing, he wasn't kicking on for me at Milan. And he certainly didn't really kick on again last season either, in terms of what he's truly capable of. But there's still areas that need sorting. That's a glaring one, isn't it? But it looks as like he will stay and occupy one of the forward areas. You've got Pulisic there. I've mentioned Yashari. Ricci is somebody who, I don't know, I'm not totally convinced by yet. So I'm quite interested to see how he does at a bigger club. There's a talent there, but I'm not 100% sold on him. I'm more sold on Yashari than I am on him. Estupiñán makes sense for me on the left. A very good player. Modric, wow. I mean, that's exciting, isn't it? I mean, I know the age, and he isn't going to play every game, but the fact that they've not got Europe means that he'll, I would imagine he'll be available with the level of fitness he has for quite a lot of the matches. So we'll see how he's utilised as well. But that is a signing. Look, I think I said when he signed, and you thought of it, if you marry up Luka Modric with AC Milan, I mean, that is some combination, isn't it? In terms of player and club. So I really hope that he stays fit and that goes well. And he'll be really important, I would think, for Allegri in terms of getting across. We talked earlier about a change of culture, a change of mentality, that things had gone toxic. Well, somebody like him will be so important, won't he, in terms of knitting everything together off the pitch, you would think, with his standards and his personality. And I think he could be a really useful asset in that respect. So there's some things that are still a little unsure of, and things that are up in the air, but some things more concrete, and he would certainly fit into that bracket.
What do you think about Malik Chow leaving for the money that he did and going for Koni de Winter as a replacement for half the price of Chow's sale? Because there's been a lot of discourse in the fan base about it being a perfect symbol of the way that we do things. We develop a player to an extent, we sell big, and then we try replace them with someone worth less, when in theory, based on the reports, you've got someone like Camuzzo at Fiorentina available for 35, 40, Leone, who's obviously a big talent, available at 40 million. But despite getting the money that we did, we weren't in for him,
Well, those two young centre halves you've mentioned there, I am a big fan of both of those. I really do think that both of them can be real stars. I remember watching Camuzzo early on last season, and I hadn't really heard anything about him until he broke into the team when Milenkovic left. And the first game I saw him, I was like, wow, who is this? This kid's got some. And then when I realized how old he was, I couldn't quite believe it. And Leone was similar when I saw him towards the end of last season. I really do like both of them. I wonder whether there is talk that, particularly I've heard with Leone, that there's certainly Premier League interest, and Liverpool are being quite strongly linked with him. So whether that's that he's maybe been promised elsewhere, I don't know. But in terms of the sale of Malik Chow, I think Milan have done very well there personally, because he's somebody who we've seen. He's got all the raw materials for me to be a very, very good defender. And I think we've seen that in glimpses during his time at Milan, but never consistently and never really over a prolonged period. And we've also seen it where, mistakes have creeped in. And I suppose you could use the excuse that, well, look at the state of flux the team and the club has been in during his time there, several different coaches, different formations. Has that worked against him? And yeah, maybe it has to an extent, but I still don't think that. I still would have liked to have seen more consistency from him, and probably to get the fee that they have, and to bring in somebody who's got quite a bit of promise, like De Winter. I think is, like you said, the fans are probably right. It's evidence of Milan perhaps developing a player to an extent, getting a good fee for a player, but then being clever and looking to work things in the market in the restrictions that they have, because they've got to be really clever with the way that they spend their money, particularly if they still need a centre forward. They can't spend, probably big money on a centre back at the moment. So they've got to work within their means. And that probably partly explains why they've not gone that extra money and gambled more on someone like a Leone or a Camuzzo, if indeed they are available.
Go on,
go for it, Matt.
No, I was just going to build on that. Out of all the transfers you've seen this summer in Serie A, and it could be any team, what deal do you think sticks out as the best business done in Serie A this summer so far?
Oh, wow. I'd have to get... God, could have done with some prior warning for that one.
Sorry.
I'd have to get across everything. Let's see what I can get up on here. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Oh God, trying to think.
Sorry. Tough one, isn't it? It kind of reflects Serie A. I don't want to bash the league, because obviously we cover it and we want to promote it, but it kind of reflects Serie A in a way that, then it's never the centre of the massive deals, really. The headline signings in terms of the biggest names this summer have been frees at the end of their careers in Modric and De Bruyne. And that's not to diminish what either of them have achieved, but they are twilight years for both of them. And maybe that's a reflection of where Italian football has kind of fallen to, in a way.
Well, I'm looking at I've got all the summer transfers up here now. And if you're to start with Napoli, I mean, they've sort of covered a lot of the areas where you felt that they needed to strengthen perhaps the starting 11. In January, they bought players in. You thought, well, it strengthens the squad maybe a little bit, but it doesn't really strengthen the starting 11. For them to get to the end of the season and win the title, I thought was a real coaching feat of Conte's when you consider that. They were bringing somebody in like an Okafor, just for instance, who barely played. Billing did okay occasionally from the bench, but these weren't players that were going to improve the starting 11. So for them to get someone like Bokema in, Kevin De Bruyne is clearly somebody who improves the starting 11. Luca's a really interesting one. Personally, and I think people would disagree with me on this, but I still think Meret's a better keeper than Milinkovic-Savic. But, that's up for debate. Noah Lang is somebody who'll give them another option on either flank. So I think they've done well to really look to try and strengthen, to use a cliche, from a position of strength. Inter have been, when you consider the refresh that their squad needs, there hasn't really been any of the transfers that I've seen that have been what you might call eye-catching, to try and go directly to your question. I mean, that somebody like Boni, who they've got from Parma, he looks decent. He looks like somebody who's got a high ceiling of growth. But is he somebody that comes in and you think, oh wow, that that's a real statement? No, I don't think he is. I mean, Luis Enrique from Marseille. Let's see what he can do. Sucic, I've got to be honest, I don't know a lot about him, so I'm intrigued to see a bit more about him.
I think they're hanging a lot on Ademola Lookman, aren't they? But it's strange because, presuming that, and I do want to ask a question as well about everything that's happened in Serie A, all the changes and stuff. But obviously they've gone to Chivu, and it's quite a big change from Simone Inzaghi. I feared that era would never end for them with the way that he had them playing and reaching Champions League finals and things like that. But it is quite a big culture shock in that sense. And I think they're going to maybe play with a 3-4-2-1 instead of a 3-5-2, so you can get an extra forward in there. But it just feels like all they're trying to do is like outscore teams. If they got Bonnie in, but they've got Thuram and Lautaro already, and if they get Lookman in, like, how do they all fit? I find that interesting.
It's hard to picture it at the minute, isn't it? And that's, when I thought about Inter towards the end of last season, it just felt that even though they didn't turn up in the Champions League final, that it was a team that was so well structured and so harmonious in its structure. And we were so used to seeing how all the different, all the players seemed to know all these interchangeable movements that they would do, where you would see like DiMarco suddenly appear in central midfield or Bastoni, and it was all so interchangeable. So to go from that to something very different, as you say, is going to be fascinating to see how Inter adjust. I think Jonathan David is quite, maybe not necessarily a massive headline grabber, but I do think Jonathan David at Juve is a good signing for the club and the league, actually, because he's somebody who's done well in France for a little while now, and established international footballer. So that is one that I remember. I'd almost forgotten about it because it seemed to happen that long ago, didn't it? So that is certainly one that interests me. And Evan Ferguson going to Roma, I mean, he started in pre-season like a house on fire, didn't he? Yeah. And if anybody can get him scoring goals, you'd think it'd be Gasperini, with the way that he's done that with so many strikers over the years, and strikers maybe who'd struggled a bit elsewhere as well. So that for me is another really interesting one. Fiorentina again have been bringing in players. I mean, Simon Som is not necessarily the most sort of glamorous of players, but I really like him. Mm-hmm. So Edin Dzeko, I mean, the guy's just never stops, does he? I was at the City Ground when they played Fiorentina Forest the other day, and it was great to see him in the flesh again, and Stefano Pioli on the touchline as well. So just looking at Lazio, who've basically a lot of it is players who they had on loan last season, isn't it? Who they've made permanent.
With the changes in the managers, I think it was 6 out of the top 8 managers were swapped, this season. Who do you think are like the big winners in terms of new coach, and probably the losers in terms of who they appointed?
Well, we're going to see, aren't we? It's quite interesting for me. I kind of, just to flip that, I'm quite interested to see how much the clubs who've had the continuity benefit from that as well. Mm-hmm. Like Conte there, and Italiano as well at Bologna. That it'd be quite interesting to see how that affects things, because there has been so much change at these clubs. Tudor, I suppose, had, what was it, a month, 6 weeks at the end of last season. So he was
technically still there.
I don't think he's necessarily an appointment that the Juve fans, from what I read, seem to be like hugely enthused by, which leads me to think, if they were to have a dodgy start, could that kind of unravel quite quickly? But we'll see how he does. Lazio was a bit of a mess, wasn't it? I mean, not the first time that's happened either.
You can. I mean, the thing with Lazio is, even when you think that they've sort of got their stuff figured out, they will provide a summer where it's just complete chaos. I mean, I remember, it's going back a while now, it might be 10 years, when they had Bielsa in the door. Yeah. And he took one look at it, and 4 days later he was out. He thought, no, I can't deal with this.
The funny thing about that was that Inzaghi was not the first choice, and he kind of rescued them when when Bielsa came in and, just like you say, took a look and went, "See you, lads." And he and then you look, think what a magnificent job he did, and how his career has gone on. So out of chaos can come beauty, but we'll see whether that's the case here. I think a club that retain their coach and I think could be a threat this season to certainly the European places is Como.
Totally agree, yeah.
They're one of the real interesting ones in the league, aren't they? And you asked me about transfers. You can go through the list and you can say, well, he's decent. He's done well at Betis, like Rodriguez, and you can look at it and go, well, there's some interesting players there. But I think if I look at it collectively and see the commitment and the show of intent with the amount of money that they've spent has been, I think it's been over 100 million euro. I think it could be. I'm not
Probably
absolutely
with Morata to add to that as well. Thank you very much, lads.
So they're really going for it, and the tenacity with which they showed their teeth when Inter came calling for Fabregas. I thought then, because I think this club could push to sort of challenge for the European places at the end of last season. And then when they fought the way that they did to hold on to their coach, and now that they've spent the way that they have, I've been impressed by that. But I think if I'm to answer your original question, if I'm to look at the league and think which of the managerial appointments I'm most intrigued and excited by, I'm also to tie in with that a club who I think could do good things this season. I would say Roma, personally.
Yeah.
Because the way that they finished last season, I know under Ranieri, who'll still be at the club in a sort of a hierarchy role, but Gasperini has waited a long time for that second chance at what you might call one of the established elite of Italian football. Now, I know he's made Atalanta part of that elite in a way, with what he's achieved. But in terms of the established historical elite, he had that very brief time at Inter, and now he's got this sort of second shot with Roma, and I think that is really interesting how that will all pan out.
On the flip side of that, the team that I don't say fear for, because I don't fear for them. I suppose they're technically a rival. They don't like us and things like that. But the decision, or not the decision, it felt like sort of the carousel was winding round and teams were sort of picking their managers off like we did, weighing things up. Right, let's get Allegri and be happy with what we've got there. And then sort of when all the dust settled, you've got Atalanta, and they decide to go for Ivan Juric. That to me feels like a tough sell, because I think the style of his Torino teams were, known for being very different to Gasperini's way of playing. Basically, they were tough, they were physical, they would try outrun you, and they would be compact and things like that. It feels like the opposite to Gasperini's entertainers, the teams that would score 3, 4, 5, 7 sometimes. So I feel like they might have a bit of a drop off. Do you think of anything to the contrary, or are you also fearful for them?
Well, I suppose with Atalanta, it must be difficult for Atalanta because they wouldn't have wanted to change their coach because everything was working just fine. They would have been happy to keep it as it was. And I could be wrong here. I'm obviously not a fly on the wall in the decision-making process as to why they've gone with Juric, but he's very well known, isn't he, as a disciple of Gasperini. Yeah. Now, the club might have looked at it and thought, well, yeah, there are differences in the way that they will play, certainly in terms of you've outlined there, in terms of the attacking defensive differences, easy on the eye and all that. But I suppose there are principles there that they might have gone, well, we've lost him, but we might retain some of the principles, some of the ideas, almost like a bit of a halfway house, rather than just go for something completely different. They're probably, because they would have been so happy with the way things that were going, that might have played into their thinking. Now, only time will tell as to whether that was a wise decision or whether they should have just gone, right, the man's gone, let's let the idea go with him. And perhaps they've maybe tried to hold on to that past a little bit with that appointment. I'm not sure. I wouldn't know what they're thinking. That's one way you would explain the employment of somebody like Juric, who just had 2 terrible experiences in his last 2 jobs. Because in terms of his last 2 jobs, he shouldn't have been anywhere near a job as prestigious as Atalanta right now.
Yeah.
So that explains it to a degree.
I find the Palladino thing quite interesting as well, because I don't only the people that were in the room know exactly what happened in terms of him leaving Fiorentina. My gut feeling, I think AJ's got the same sort of feeling, is that he maybe sensed the opportunity to make a bit of a jump upwards to one of the teams that, the job had become available at. And I thought Palladino would have been a good fit for Atalanta in terms of continuing that style of play. And yet here he is, he's been left without a job. So, you've got one of the young up-and-coming managers in Italian football that has maybe jumped a little bit too soon and is without employment. So, I wonder where he ends up. Might it be that someone pulls the trigger early in the season and brings him in? I don't
bingo.
know. I think that's it, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's what he'll be probably waiting for, because, as you say, I mean, he established a pretty good reputation. It was a little bit rocky at times, I felt, behind the scenes at Fiorentina, wasn't it? I can remember an occasion where I think he came close to leaving during the season. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens with that. But inevitably, there will be a club that perhaps does go early in terms of, to go back to what we said at the start, the old calcio chaos. There probably will be a fairly big club that has a disappointing start to the season, and he'd be one of probably the first in line. But, just as we go through the transfers there, and we talk about the different managers, and we talk about what we expect of different clubs and all the different subplots, it just sort of reminds me as to how much we've got to get excited about. It's going to be absolutely brilliant again, I think, this season. And how Milan fit into that, again, is going to be fascinating to see what more squad additions they can make between now and the end of the window, particularly in the centre forward area. I think there's a lot of Milan fans, probably updating their phones all the time, waiting to see if there's any news on that one. You guys probably can relate to that. And I would love to see them get Højlund. I know I get there would be people who would be less excited about Højlund than I am. But I would like that. I think that could make quite a bit of sense.
So to round out the season, then, early predictions. Who do you got for Scudetto and top four? Well,
I mean, nobody's retained the title since Juventus, have they? It keeps swapping hands. So, and I know, I think I've got to go with Napoli. I just look at how good they were under Conte last season, with a squad that has been improved quite significantly with some of the additions that have made. They certainly look stronger on paper to me now. I mean, adding somebody like De Bruyne and Bokema, who are really like the centre half as well. So, the wide position on the left was an issue that they needed to address, and they've done that as well with Lang, who can play on either flank. So, for me, even though nobody's been able to retain it for a while now, I'd make them favourites. How they deal with European football, because Conte's famously so much better when he's got them just for, just with, he can work for a whole week. Yeah. So real training ground coach. So we'll see how that plays out, but I'd make them favourites. Inter, a lot of people are sort of seem to be really homing in on Inter as the second favourites, but I sort of agree with the sentiment that came out from you guys earlier, that I'm a bit unsure as to how it's all going to work at Inter. I
think that's where Palladino goes. I think he was the first one out.
Perhaps. Yeah, I think he could be onto something there. I'm reserving judgment a little bit there. Milan, look, if they don't qualify for, it's got to be what? I mean, you guys, it's your opinion counts more than mine, but I would say it's got to be Europa League minimum without European football.
And I'd say top four. I think they're
top four. Yeah.
So that's another interesting one. I think Roma could really push in terms of, at the very least, being in the top four. If they get somebody who's scoring goals with great regularity, like there's the potential for Ferguson to do, then that would make a big difference too. So I expect them to push this season. I tend to agree, really sadly, because I'd hate to see this happen, but I do tend to agree that there probably will be an Atalanta drop-off this season. I think losing Gasperini and possibly Lookman as well is going to take quite a lot out of them. I just hope that it isn't a decline that ultimately sends them back to where they were in terms of that.
I won't mind it.
Well,
they've done our head in for years.
Yeah.
I've got a bold prediction to tag on to that, though, that you were speaking about Como, and I've got them breaking into the European places as well. Remember how Atalanta, as you mentioned, was sort of like an elevator up and down between Serie A and Serie B, and then they broke into Europe, and they had the sort of project that enabled them to stay in the European places year after year. I think Atalanta and Como are going to swap. I think Como will become the new Atalanta. That's my feeling.
Well, Como are definitely going places. I was there actually a couple of weeks ago. It was so mad to sort of walk around where the flying school is. So have you been?
Yeah.
Presumably you've been.
Yeah, I've been. Yeah.
You've got this flying school with the planes sort of parked, if I could say that, on the lake. And then, you just literally turn your head there and the stadium's right there. And then you've got the lake. And it must be the best away day in anywhere in football.
Yeah. Milan won the league there in the 90s and took over the stadium. And I just think that must have been one of the great away days in football.
Oh, it doesn't get any better than that, does it?
No, it doesn't.
Winning the league there. So it's a really, I can see why it's clearly appealing to some big names. I mean, who wouldn't want to live there? There's obviously money being invested. There's ambition, and I think that they are really exciting. But I get why, from a Milan perspective, it maybe wouldn't be so disappointing to see Atalanta fall off. But I've got to say, from a neutral perspective, I'd be really sad about that, because what they've done at that club is utterly remarkable. I mean, it's one of the. I mean, Gasparini is, in my opinion, it's one of the great coaching feats of his generation. What he's managed to achieve at that football club. I mean, to take a team that's just always been a provincial, a team that was always well known and well respected for its academy, but there was no history of success there at all, was there? So what he's done is incredible. But yeah, I mean, to go back to Como, I mean, you look at the players. I mean, I've got the list here with Jesus Rodriguez, who is really well thought of in Spain at Betis. I saw a little bit of him last season. That's the biggest outlay, I think, isn't it? That they've spent at just about 22 million euro. Nicholas Kuhn at Celtic, another good player. Baturina, I've heard good things about. Yeah. Jadon Adai, I saw a bit of at RZ last season, playing in Europe. There's many others there as well. They've got Peroni as well, who they've got him from Manchester City. So, yeah, real intent being shown by them in the market and by keeping their coach too. So they've got to be challenging. I would have thought that would be the expectation at the club this season, that they will really look to challenge to get into Europe.
Diao and Nico Pass as well, keeping those two. They are
really great point.
So good. Anyway, we'll wrap it up there. Adam, thank you.
I have one question actually.
Go on. Sorry. Yeah.
I saw this and I want to say it was maybe a week or 2 weeks back. I don't remember who posted it, but someone posted your greatest Serie A 11, and I thought it was a very unique 11. I want to know the thought process behind those players, and I don't have it in front of me. I tried to find it, but if you remember what it was.
Milan player.
There seems to have been a bit of confusion over this, because people saying it was my greatest 11 of the time I've commentated on the league, not my greatest ever 11.
Okay.
I had a mate I had a mate the other day who I'd organised to meet for a drink, who I hadn't seen for about 2 years, and the first thing he said to me as I walked through the door at the pub was, "Mate, I don't agree with that team." I went, "What do you mean?" He says, "I mean, you've left you've included Teo Hernandez, but not Maldini." And I was like, "Mate, it's not an all-time."
Daniel Maldini.
And the other thing that people just didn't seem to get as well, I mean, I got so many messages on Instagram from some of them quite abusive as well, was that it wasn't the best 11.
Okay.
It was my favorite 11.
Yeah.
All right.
So there's a big difference. And the reason because many people were also pointed out how Napoli heavy it was. Yes. And the reason for that was that the two sort of teams that I've most enjoyed watching were the Spalletti Napoli team and Sarri's best Napoli team. They were the two teams that, if you said to me, who was the easiest on the eye? Now, Inter, for instance, I really admired last season for the technicality of the way that they played, their organisation and all that. But in terms of, you said to me, who did you most look forward to watching? Well, it was those teams. So that's, why someone like Koulibaly was in there, who I always enjoyed. Trying to remember who else. Lobotka's in there.
Great shout, that. I love Lobotka.
Higuain, very underrated, I think, Lobotka.
Yeah.
A player who's been adored by coaches of the quality of Spalletti and Conte, and I saw Xavi eulogizing about him. Iniesta has as well. So I think he's a little bit underappreciated, Lobotka. I think he's wonderful at what he does. But yeah, it was my sort of favorite 11. So I had Teo Hernandez in there at left back. Largely due to how much I enjoyed his link up with Rafael Leao during the title winning season. That was the main reason that he was there. So for anyone who's not seen it, I had Buffon in goal. I had Di Lorenzo at right back. Now I've got loads of abuse for Di Lorenzo at right back. Remember, this is over the last 12 years. So all the time. And I could have gone for somebody like a Lichtsteiner. But again, I felt that Di Lorenzo is underappreciated, and that every time I watch him, I feel that he contributes going forward. And at the back, he's been part of several defenses that have had the best record in the league. He's captained the club to as many Scudettos as Maradona has. I think this is a guy who's,
I like Di Lorenzo. I'm a big fan.
And then it was Koulibaly, Chiellini, Teo, Lobotka, Radja Nainggolan, who I absolutely loved watching. Dybala at the tip of a diamond midfield. Sergej Milinkovic-Savic on the left. That was the position that I struggled the most with. I initially had Pogba, and then I changed it to Milinkovic-Savic. I just always loved watching his link up with Immobile. They were just the way that it was almost telepathic. And then my centre forwards were Higuain and Mertens. And Higuain, when he was at his absolute peak at Napoli, which is the era from when I sort of picked it, not Juve where he won all his league titles, but it was the Napoli Higuain that I enjoyed. And I just thought, wow, this guy's he's like a raging bull of a centre forward. This guy, he's absolutely unstoppable, isn't he? When he was at his peak.
Well, he deserved a couple of Scudetti at Napoli. I mean, what did they finish one season? Like 96 points?
Yeah, really unlucky, weren't they? Yeah.
And there were 2 seasons they got 90+ points, but it was, funnily enough, Allegri's Juve that managed to just get a bit more,
And then the last player was Mertens. And again, I could have picked lots of different players for that one. Immobile was somebody that I thought, simply because of his amazing record over the whole time I've covered the league. But I think football is about, sometimes football should be fun and football should put a smile on your face. And every time I watched him play, he made me smile. He was just played with a joy. And, to be Napoli's all-time top scorer, having originally been a wide player, I think that's incredible. So hopefully that explains the team.
For everyone.
Yeah, the caveat of favorite really makes a big difference, because when it said like all time, I thought, but fantastic 11.
Nowhere near all time. If I did an all time, I think it would be totally different. And if I were to do a best, then that would probably be a little bit different. There would still be players who probably would have been included from those 12 years who were in that, and in terms of, but I think you couldn't be really leaving out players like Pirlo and Immobile over that time, but it was just more players that I'd taken a joy from watching as much as anything too. So it was. I challenge you to do it, actually. See what you can, because it was over the last. So it was 2013 to 2025. But it was. It took me a whole night to pick, which is a bit sad.
No, I do love stuff like that. I prefer it when it is like that, favorite players, ones you've most enjoyed watching. Like my dad once got me to do a Huddersfield Town one, because that's my local team, my boyhood team. And he said, don't just do the best team, because it would be the team that got us to the Premier League. Do the ones you actually felt a
that
connection.
Was the idea.
It's a similar sort of vibe to that. Adam, thank you so much for your time. We really, really appreciate it. Same time next year.
I always enjoy coming on. It's a great podcast that you do, so thank you for inviting me. And let's see how it pans out for Milan this season, and whether they get this centre forward eventually.
Yeah, and if it's Hoyland and he's bagging goals, then don't worry, I'll do a little clip of what you said and put it out and see.
Don't do it the other way around.
No, I won't. No. Remember when he said this? Because I think I'd have some receipts as well, because I'm in favour of
There's always a clip.
There is, yeah, there is. Yeah, thank you so much. Be sure to check out those of you who can watch Serie A on TNT Sports, of course. And yeah, just keep up the amazing work with the commentary. As I said, I really mean it. I think you're
Thanks,
best
Ollie.
in
That's
it.
kind of you.
And yeah, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Ollie.
Brilliant. Right, so mate, we have got a couple of games to talk about here. I don't really want to talk about these ones because I'm not the biggest fan of preseason in general. As I've sort of made clear during this entire summer, especially when we're playing teams that are at such different levels of preparation and things like that. But this in particular, I was a bit skeptical of going into it because we were playing 2 games in 24 hours against 2 teams who were 1 week away from the start of their season. We played Leeds United in Dublin and we played Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. Let's start, shall we, with the 11 that we named for the Leeds game. Now, I didn't manage to see this one in full because I was out that day watching Huddersfield Town remain top of the league with a 2-0 victory against Reading. Terracciano in goal, Manye, Gabia, Pavlovic, Estupinian the back 4, 3-man midfield of Salah, Musa and Jashari, then Chukwueze, Jimenez and Okafor, the front 3. That's Santi Jimenez. And he scored. So first game for him in pre-season, first goal, nice far post finish. I think that's the big positive to take from this, really.
Yeah, there was a mischance that he had a bit earlier that I'm sure people are going to highlight, so I might as well just do it. I can't remember who he was with. It was one of the Leeds defenders, and the defender slipped like right on the penalty spot, which left Santi wide open in on goal. And as he went to take the shot, he also slipped. And so, I mean, obviously that spot, there had to be something. I think the commentator even mentioned, like, yeah, this was heavily watered before. It's slippery all over.
Overwatered.
Yeah. And I think there were a few other slips, but that was the most notable because it was a surefire goal that, in hindsight, would have won the meaningless game. But overall, I mean, look, I've always been a Jimenez fan. That's never been a secret. I thought he looked good overall for being his first game back. We know he was staying fit after the Gold Cup, so it's not like he just went partying, eating a bunch of junk food and got out of shape. He was fine. The main one that I'm sure everyone wants to hear about is Jashari. It was his debut. Look, I was very impressed with him the first 45. I know he stayed on for like an hour. The second half was a totally different game, so I'll just caveat that. But the first half, I mean, every time he got on the ball, I was just so impressed with his long passes, the way he was finding, I think it was Okafor and Estupinian on the wing. Just every single time he passed it, I was like, how did you see that pass and how did you complete it? I mean, it was impressive. And when he was under pressure, I might get hate for this, but he reminded me of Seedorf, the way he was just able to stay on the ball and muscle people away. I don't know how tall Jashari is. I don't think he's very tall, but he looks stocky. He's got those strong tree trunk legs. And man, I was really impressed with him. Adam obviously mentioned obviously mentioned what he did to Atalanta last season. I also watched that game, but I'm not going to pretend like I kept an eye on him specifically. The highlight of that game for me was Toloi trying to throw the ball at someone's head and somehow missing it and then falling. Never forget that. That's the greatest moment in football history. But overall, I'd say that was about it. None of the young kids did anything for me. I know Magni, I had to pull up the names here, got the assist. Lucky deflection that he wanted to be a shot, so it wasn't, he didn't do anything great for their second half was not it. I mean, we brought on more of the youth players, more of the Serie D team squad, and
you could tell they kind of dialed up. It's almost like they wanted to finish strong. I feel like if not that the result matters, but I think on the balance of play, if Leeds had maybe nicked that, it wouldn't have been too much of a disservice to the way that the game went. It was a tough watching times. Kubisia, Eletu, Torriani came on in the second half, so you can see what we were trying to do there, really. Filippo Terracciano as well. And yeah, I mean, the one other youth player that stood out, and he was man of the match in our player ratings, so I'll give Isaac the shout on this one. Emanuele Sala, who played at the base of the midfield, only 17 years of age, could completely shrink in those circumstances. You know, we've seen some of our youth players perhaps not impressed when they've been given the minutes, but got stuck in plenty, looked composed on the ball, and yeah, they were
Isaac gave
bits
him
and
man of the match.
yeah. The bits and pieces
choice.
that Chukwueze and Okafor certainly in the first half looked bright as well. You know, you sort of getting into the territory with both of them there where it's like there's not a problem there anymore. If they have to be backup wingers for the season, then we're all okay with it, you know. And they can both provide something a bit different off the bench as well. But yeah, that's the Leeds game. Whatever, move on. The Chelsea game I want to speak even less about because 24 hours later, we made 10 changes. If you look at the three-man defence that we named, you've got Andrea Kubis in there, and you've got Tomori in the middle, and you've got Filippo Terracciano as a right centre-back. Kind of says a lot, really. Bartizaghi playing as a wing-back again. It was a bit all over the place. We also were promised a Luka Modric start that never happened, and then Allegri comes out after the game and says, yeah, he was never going to start. And yeah, I mean, Loftus-Cheek obviously played on his return there. Fofana, Richie, Musa in the midfield.
Yeah.
He was the only player to start 2 in a row. Salamaca's wide right. Leao up front, which again says a lot about the fact we've only got one striker.
We had 2 starters in this entire game, Mignon and Leao was out of position. So just make what you will of the rest of it. I mean, you want to talk about Cubis or?
Yeah, all right. Okay, I'll start with a defense of him. As soon as that own goal hits him and goes in, and I think, of course, he's partially to blame for that in terms of not dealing with it. But as soon as that goes in, it ain't going to be his day, is it? You know. But then for the second goal, it wasn't his fault. Tamori was the loosest man. And then the red card, he gets sold out there as well. To be left 1-on-1 with somebody quick running in behind is not what you want. That's not how you subject, you know, he's still a kid. I mean, he's 20 now, I think, but you know, it's not helping him really. And okay, it's pre-season, and this is the minutes you're going to get to show that you've got it. You know, you need to make an instant impression. But I just think the circumstances were set up for him to fail massively. And also the referee giving that red card felt a bit of a dickhead move, to be honest.
Yeah, that early into the game. I mean, look, if it's regular season, if it's against us, you want that call because by the rules, it is a red card. It's the right call. But yeah, I mean, it's the 8th minute, 10th minute, and this is a preseason game with a 20-year-old kid who just scored an own goal. Like it was a little rough, but also, you know, he was wearing a giant Premier League logo on his chest, the referee. So his priority is to get Chelsea up and running, you know, for the season, and that's fine. But a little odd that we went with that route. Also, it doesn't matter, but it does because it's like 4-1 and. Look, you look at the lineup, the fact that we played, like you said, Terracciano, a midfielder who since departed the club as a third center back, Cubis, a child, Musa, who has been in talks to be leaving the club, playing him as a right wing back, Fofana, who's probably going to be third or fourth choice center mid, Bartizaghi, who's a child and a backup left back, Salamakers, who we don't know where his starting position. He's now the left attacking mid. That's crazy. Loftus-Cheek, who might be the 5th choice midfielder, is also starting. And then Leao, our first choice left winger, is starting at striker. It almost makes you just say, what was the point? Why did we play this game? Like, who did it help get ready for the season? If that's the point of preseason, is to develop and get ready and warm up, especially the final game of preseason. Typically, you would put out your best 11 and the formation you want to use and just see, okay, are we prepared? But that wasn't what we did.
Could we have not spaced those games out a bit more, or could we not? Because the Leeds game was confirmed first, and then the Chelsea one after. Could we not just say no? We're going to put everything into that Leeds game, or cancel it and just say no? We want to test ourselves against Chelsea and just have a proper squad for 90 minutes and try actually get into match rhythm rather than just accepting off the bat that we're just not going to be able to compete. That's how it felt to me, and it turned into a bit of a farce, really.
And I watched it with a couple of Chelsea fans. And when the lineups came out, the first thing I said was, well, congrats on the win. Like, it was so blatantly obvious. And I asked him, I said, is this, in your opinion, your best 11? He said, outside of the 2 center backs, said that's probably going to be their full power starting team. So there's that. They were missing 2 starters, and we only had 2 starters. So, I mean, the result is exactly what it was always going to be. I do think the penalty call that they got was bullshit. And then, of course, the red card, the own goal. Like, there was a lot of dubious stuff, but look, the way Delap took his goal was incredible. Not just his pen. His pen was a fantastic penalty, regardless of how he won the penalty. But his goal was great as well. So Delap looks to be a good player for Chelsea. And Fofana's goal was awesome as well. Salamaker slipped the ball through. A lot of good build-up. And I will say, I think Leao actually did very well outside of, not getting a goal or an assist. And there was another moment where Fofana should have had a goal first. Early on, he rounded the keeper and then just didn't shoot. It was very odd.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there are actually, in a weird way, a few positives to take from this game, but overall, whatever.
Yeah. I don't want to overanalyze it, and we'll move on, straight after this. But I actually thought going forward we looked pretty good. There was some good. I won't call them attacking patterns or patterns of play or anything like that, because what it felt like is, after that red card, Chelsea decided to turn it into an attacking training session, and therefore were happy to leave quite a bit of space at the back. But it was space that we exploited, and we certainly stretched them. Salamakers could have had more assists than what he ended up with. He was bright, and as you mentioned, Leao was bright. I thought Loftus-Cheek had moments where he carried the ball forward effectively. There were bits to take from it, but Allegri said at the end of the game, look at the circumstances. This is not a disaster or a nightmare. It's all about minutes in the legs ahead of the actual start of action on Sunday against Bari. Nice segue. I think it's pronounced Bari, actually, but I don't intend to. Bari, like sheep. Serie B opponent. It's been a few years since we played in the round of 32 of the Coppa Italia, which obviously we are in because of how low we finished in the league table last season and the fact that Bologna ended up winning the thing. We as a result are in at the round of 32 stage. They finished 9th in Serie B last season, so missing out on the playoffs. For me, Bari have been out of Serie A for way too long for the size of club that they are. If you were to look at Serie A tables from the 90s into the 2000s, they're always there. And they play in a 59,000 seat stadium. They've got a big historic fan base. They're from a Puglia region that is football mad. I would like to see them sort of get back up again, even though there's a few
Were they
teams.
close last season to get in there? I believe so, right?
9th.
Oh,
9th. If I remember rightly, they were in the playoff picture for quite a while, and then they fell off a little bit at the end. But one thing I will say is that people are going to go into this and presume, and I'd say rightly so, with the strength of squads compared and things like that, presume that we win without breaking much sweat. However, Napoli found themselves in this position last season where, because they finished 9th, they had to play in this round of the Coppa Italia, and they drew 0-0 at home against Modena, and they had to go to penalties, and they won on penalties. So these are banana skins, because Bari can just come, park the bus, and make it as difficult as possible for us. And the longer that we are waiting for a goal, I think the more, because there's already been 57,000 tickets sold for this one. So, we're getting towards it being an August bank holiday sellout game. I just wonder, an early goal would really settle the nerves in this one. What would your team be, and how worried are you, or are you just not worried at all?
I think we use this almost as that final preseason warm-up game. So I think you do put your strongest 11 out. You have a week until the season starts at that point, because we were in the Coppa Italia final last season, and I think we actually have a decent path to getting it again this season. But ultimately, it's not the competition that matters. And if you're Max, you're thinking, oh, if we just don't make it out of the Coppa Italia, that's, potentially 8 games we save on our schedule. And now we're only playing 40 games this season, 41, including the Bari game. And all of a sudden the workload becomes a lot more manageable, and that could help him in the long term. Not that he's going to say throw the game or anything like that. I think they are going to play to win. But I don't think it's going to be that big of a important game for them, outside of the fact that it's his first competitive match since returning to Milan. He probably doesn't want to lose that.
He won't be on the sidelines, though, because he's got to serve a touchline ban because of that Juve final.
You're right.
Of course,
that's hilarious. Hilarious. And honestly, it's the best game for it because this is the least intimidating one. And I think what that means is you're going to see a lot of just play your game, guys, And I think you're going to see Leao probably get a goal, probably doing his thing, because Bari hasn't played a guy with Leao's explosiveness in Serie B. I don't watch it, but I guarantee you that. So yeah, I mean, we'll win this game. I think we do get that early goal, and then we sit back because why not? I don't know. I mean, if they have Allegri tactics down already, which is a big if, then we probably do get an early goal. We sit back because they're going to try to attack, but they're not going to be good enough. We're going to intercept, and then this long ball's over the top to Leao, and he's in on a hat trick. Anything could happen like that. The last competitive goal scored for Milan against Bari, do you know who it was?
Could you give me the year?
2011.
2011. Zlatan?
Close. He was the second to last.
Pato?
Cassano.
Wow. Okay, yeah. Good trivia. Very good trivia. I was just looking here at Bari last season to see who their top scorer was and therefore their main threat. Do you remember the name Kevin Lasagna?
How could I forget?
I know, but sadly he's gone back. His loan from Verona's expired, so they don't have him anymore, which is a real shame. But yeah, I think this is either going to be a bit harder than we want it to be, so like a 1-0 or a 2-0, or it could be a bit of a demolition if Barry decide to just drop gloves and like have a pop,
Yeah.
So we'll see. I don't think there'll be any surprises in the team for this one. I don't think De Winter will go straight in, to be honest. So I think it'll be Mignan. I think it'll be Tomori, Gabia, Pavlovic, Stupin on one side, and Salamanca's right wing back. Then Richie, what do you say? Richie moves to Loftus Cheek. Or do you think
I'd give it to Modric, man. I would. I would start them all and just see what it's like. Modric,
Shari. As a 3. Yeah. I would do that too, but I can definitely see him playing Loftus Cheek because he seems to have a fascination.
The other thing is, do we know if Pulisic's going to be back? Because if not, that changes the lineup, He's supposed
to be back in training today. They're training this evening, I think. So we will see. But it sounds like he's going to be back very soon, and sort of missing the trip was a precautionary thing. Same with Alex Jimenez too, who he doesn't feel like a big thing, but I think having an extra wing back who can play both sides is going to be pretty useful. And yeah, as you say, it's a bit of a dry run ahead. Not a dry run because it's a knockout game ultimately, but we've then got Cremonese at home 1 week after that in the first league game, and this could age terribly, but that's our easiest game of the season on paper, potentially. A newly promoted team at home.
You will not be here for that game yet. You'll be on the plane, right? Are you going to miss it?
I'll be on it. I land just before it kicks off, so
yes, you'll miss it. Wow, season opener. Won't be there. I was going to offer to pick you up, but I won't anymore. I'll be busy.
No, it's fine. Don't worry about that. I will find a way to watch it. I'm sure there'll be a stream going somewhere. But yeah, if there's a delay on the flight, then it's not happening. So please, British Airways, do us a solid. Bari score prediction. I'm going to go for the 2-0.
I'm going to be just a little bit more exciting, say 3-0 for Bari.
Okay, cool.
Jokes.
And
for Milan, obviously.
Santi Jimenez and Leao to score. That's my...
I'm going to stick to what my prediction said as a bit joke and now make it real. I think Leao gets a hat trick. I think this is his time.
Nice. Seeing how long that we have been going here, so I'm going to not do questions. I apologize for that, but maybe we can do more next week or whatever. But Hope that you enjoyed listening to Adam. Always great to have him on, and hope you enjoyed listening to our post-friendly ramblings. The pre-season's over. Next time we speak on the main pod, we will have some actual competitive action to go through. Looking forward to it. The bonus pod later in the week has actually already been recorded. So Coney de Winter, please don't fail your medical, because otherwise that is going to be redundant. But it is a de Winter or de Winter deep dive. But yeah. I've been your host, Ollie Fisher. Find me on Twitter at Ollie Fisher. AJ, cheers for joining.
Yep. And everyone, Ollie's birthday is in 2 days, so wish him a happy birthday.
I don't need to do that.
You have to, or you're blocked from the channel.
Thank you, mate. And thank you, everyone in advance, if you send any wishes, whatever. I just want a win over Bari for my birthday. Have a fantastic week, everybody.